What's going on, guys? Army Teacher announced, and I am here with the GPL week number 3 Teambuilder, your Royal Bomber for Bombies, and taking on the Cataclysmic Conkeldurrs and Coach Happy Nico in an epic week 3 matchup. He's got the current kill leader on his team, and he's got some really big scary offensive threats. Can be very scary in Trick Room as well, which is a nightmare for my team as my team is fast. So could be an interesting setup. We're both 1-1 so far. We've both had 1 win, 1 loss. So definitely an interesting situation. This could definitely help define our seasons. We're both very strong players, both in pretty decent form right now. So yeah, let's talk about his team and let's talk about what I'm bringing. So, as I said, he's got the kill leader, which is his G-Max Gengar. This thing's been putting in a lot of work. It's kind of scary how much work this thing does. Its G-Max Ooze, of course, does a hell of a lot of damage to a lot of things, aside from giving him a boost as well, which makes it even harder. Means most things can't take 2 hits from it, despite the reduction in base power from other max moves. And, of course, its Max Terror is a trapping move, which is ridiculous. Doesn't actually survive a knockoff from a Zeraora, however. That's one thing to bear in mind. That might be one thing I try and use to my advantage here. But yeah, really scary Mong offensively. Does a huge amount of work. Gets coverage moves to hit Goodra. Gets Dazzling Gleam and things like that. So it is pretty terrifying. Definitely something to bear in mind. Next up are his Guts pair. He has both Conkeldurr and Obstagoon. He hasn't actually brought Obstagoon at all this season, but he has brought Conkeldurr both times in his previous matches. Good Guts user, does get hit. Can run Flame Orb if it wants to, gets decent priority moves and things like Mark Punch. I believe it gets Bullet Punch as well, gets Knockoff, gets Poison Jab, gets a lot of coverage, does get Earthquake as well for things like Cobalion and Zeraora. It really does hit pretty hard, especially with that Guts boost. Can run Iron Fist as well if he wants to. He does get the Elemental Punches, so I would expect to see Ice Punch for Goodra especially, maybe Fire Punch for Orbeetle, things like that. But yeah, could run Iron Fist, could run Guts, either way, pretty darn scary. Obstagoon, of course, he hasn't brought it all season, but the stabs in both Facade and Knockoff is actually kind of disgusting. It hits really hard. Obstruct is a great signature move that smashes defense stats of anything that makes physical contact with it on that turn, which can really set this thing up to just run through teams. It can be a little bit scary. He does need to watch out for Justify boosts on Cobalion though, so he might be slightly dissuaded from bringing it. I do also have solid fighting coverage on my team. A lot of my Pokemon get either things like Body Press or just general fighting coverage. So he might be dissuaded from bringing an Obstagoon. I think he does bring it though. That thing is a terror. I would expect to see it coming though. I do want to see it. He hasn't brought it so far, but I want to see it. Next up is his Charizard. Unfortunately not G-Max, so it's not the most powerful thing in the world. Can be physical, can be special. Decent speed to him, but I have a couple of things that outspeed it. I think it might come just because it hits things like the Whimsicott and the Cobalion pretty hard. If he does come, he might well bring Scarf to try and hit at my Zeraora. That's something that could definitely come. But I do have things that can check some of its offensive moves. It doesn't do that much to Goodra unless it's running Dragon Claw, so yeah, there is things like that. So interesting Pokemon, I think it might come, but does need to be wary of things like Jellicent. He'd have to be Special Solar Beam, so he'd have to run Sunny Day on that set, which could be risky, especially as he needs to take the turn to set up. But yeah, I'm not convinced, but I think it might come anyway, because it's one of his better out of Trick Room Pokemon. Next up is one of his good Trick Room Pokemon, which is Appleton. Appleton, decent HP, decent special attack, relatively okay bulk across the board. Can be a Subseed, which is really annoying, but does kind of get walled a little bit by Whimsicott. Doesn't really touch Whimsicott at all. Doesn't really do too much to a lot of my team. I think it could come just as like a bulky pivot, just to try and take a hit on the switch in and then switch out into a better offensive play. I could see it coming in that sense. Subseed is pretty annoying, but who knows. Next up is a mon I actually think will come. I think it's actually a big threat to my team, is Golurk. You might not think it, because Golurk's not seen as a pretty important competitive Pokemon, but nonetheless, this thing does hit my team pretty hard. Ground is very strong against my team. I have a lot of ground weaknesses, especially things like my top end, like Zeraora, Cobalion, so can be kind of an interesting dilemma for him. Golurk actually does a hell of a lot to my team if he's physically offensive. If he's not though, I can take him out relatively okay. It is pretty slow though, so that's something I need to bear in mind. Trick Room again, a very big possibility for this team. Not too convinced he can afford to bring it though, as his Trick Room setters are actually weak to quite a lot of my team, but we'll see. Speaking of his Trick Room setters, outside chance for Bronzong to come, it is his other Stealth Rocket besides Golurk. Can be Heatproof, can be Levitate, which means I might have to waste a turn to try and figure out which one he is. I think he might bring Heatproof more than Levitate. I have better fire coverage than ground coverage on my team. I do have a couple of Pokemon that get ground moves, but yeah, fire moves is probably the more common one, so he might be Heatproof, but if he is Heatproof, then I do have good ground coverage to hit his team. Bronzong could be interesting, could force me to waste a turn. Does also get Earthquake for things like Zeraora and Cobalion, but it doesn't do that much. Bronzong, not super known for its offensive power outside of Gyro Ball, so we'll see. Next up is Lantern. Gets Volt Absorb, of course, which could prevent things like my Cobalion and my Zeraora from Volt Switching, but it's pretty obvious. If he brings Lantern, I don't need to click those moves. I can just hard switch out anyway. Scald Burns could be annoying for some of my team, but not too annoying. So, yeah, I'm not sure Lantern comes. Again, it's much like the ground coverage. I do have decent grass coverage moves. Whimsicott can be really, really powerful with grass moves, so not sure Lantern comes. Pretty one-dimensional, pretty easy to predict, so we'll see. Next up is Togetic, his only fairy type on his team. I don't see it coming, to be honest. I think it doesn't really offer that much against my team. Zeraora murders it, Cobalion murders it. Pretty much anything with rock coverage can murder it. Steel coverage also hits it really, really hard. Quite a few of my Pokemon can get steel moves. So I don't really see what Togetic offers to the team. Yes, it can be a decent Baton Pass user, it can be good utility support, can be a good Wish supporter, but it's not that strong. It doesn't offer much offensively. It's got decent bulk once you give it a Violite, but if that gets knocked off, it's a pretty easy target. So I'm not too convinced. And last but by no means least, he has brought this once, but I'm not sure how it comes this week, is Mashana. Mashana, of course, relatively bulky Trick Room setter, decent special defense stat, decent special attack stat, not the best HP in the world from what I remember, and it is very one-dimensional. It doesn't get anything that Bronzong doesn't get, so that's something to bear in mind. I feel like if he does bring Trick Room, he brings Bronzong, offers a lot more pressure to my team, especially under Trick Room. Mashana, not the best coverage in the world, so yeah. That's his team, let's talk about mine. So, this time round we bought some rather interesting stuff. I tried to change up my normal play, because my first couple of weeks I kind of brought similar things, so this week we're going to try something new. So, we're bringing Zeraora, of course, as always. Pretty much, this job is to click knock off most of the time. We've sped cracked this thing with 116 speed EVs to outspeed a non-Scarf Gengar. Gengar, of course, when it actually Gigantamaxes, loses its speed anyway. It loses the effects from it, but knockoff will still apply and take off his item. Knockoff will probably actually even kill in Gigantamax. It does so much damage. But yeah, the knockoff will kill quite heavily. The max attack and Lonely Nature. Lonely is a bit of a risk, but I needed Lonely Nature because we have Grass Knot. Grass Knot is there for Golurk, knockoff plus Grass Knot. If it's a Colberry Golurk, which I think it might well be, actually guaranteed kills the Golurk, so knockoff on the switch in, Grass Knot will kill it. So that's something to bear in mind. Plasma Fist hits everything on his team that's not named Lantern, so that's something that hits hard. Interesting fact to note, Plasma Fist actually has a 63% chance to kill Gengar pre-Dynamax, so that's interesting to know. Play Rough hits the Obstagoon and the Conkeldurrs especially hard. These are things that are pretty scary for my team, so I need a good way to hit it. Play Rough seemed like a really, really solid coverage option. I considered Close Combat over Grass Knot. Grass Knot is more of a specific Golurk thing. Could also be there for Lantern, but it doesn't do the hugest amount of damage in the world unless I knock off first. So yeah, that's something to look at. But yeah, this thing's a good breaker. It is faster than pretty much everything on his team, so as long as it's not in Trick Room, we should be fine. Next up is going to be the line that steals your girl. It's going to be Cobalion, of course, running Assault Vest as well this week. This one's a very interesting set, so we're speed creeping this to outspeed Charizard. Charizard being 100 base speed, it's relatively easy to outspeed for Cobalion, which is actually naturally faster. You might see Sacred Sword there, and you might question why I've got that instead of Close Combat. Sacred Sword's actually there in case of things like Bulk Up Obstagoon. Sacred Sword is actually quite a nice move, because while it's got little less power than close combat has. It actually ignores any stat changes, so if he does try and bulk up on me, Sacred Sword doesn't care, and it just one-shots it anyway. Stone Edge hits the Charizard incredibly hard, Zone Headbutt's there for Gengar, Volt Switch is just there to get out of there in case he tries bringing in things like Obstagoon or Charizard. If I don't feel comfortable clicking Stone Edge, I can just Volt Switch away. Hey, right. Next Pokemon on the team is going to be Candy the Whimsicott. Whimsicott running Specs Infiltrator this week, which might seem a little bit strange. We don't see many Spec sets in the world. I debated running Scarf, but I actually needed the Specs damage. We sped crap this to outspeed a non-Scarf Gengar. Again, of course, if it Dynamaxes, then we're outspeeding. Spec Psychic with Timid Max Special Attack actually one-shots Gengar pre-Dynamax. Moonblast and Giga Drain hits the rest of his team pretty darn hard. Giga Drain is nice for the longevity and the recovery. Moonblast definitely ruins things like the Appleton and the Conkeldurrs. This thing's primary job is to switch in and make Appleton's life a misery. So that's pretty much what we're aiming for with this set. It does do quite a number of work. It is a very, very solid breaker in this team, which is pretty much what we're looking for. Defog is there in case he does try to Hazard Stack me. Hazards are kind of annoying for my team, especially Stealth Rocks. He does only have 2 rockers though, in the form of Golok and Bronzong, so if he brings one of them, we know it's probably got rocks, so that's something to bear in mind. But yeah, that's pretty much Whimsicott. Offensive breaker, which is unusual. I've currently only brought like supportive Whimsicott so far this season. Next up is going to be a rather fire set this week. We are bringing back Arcade Link, the G-Max Orbeetle, of course. Did really well last week, picking up 4 kills with Iron Defense Body Press. This week is running Calm Mind. It's actually running a special variant this week. Calm Mind Recover, Psychic Bug Buzz with the heavy duty boots in case of rocks being up. Definitely very, very solid. Modest Max Special Attack, kind of an unusual set. But with Calm Mind, it means I can potentially live hits from Gengar and recover up on it. Psychic actually does a hell of a lot of damage to that thing after a Calm Mind. Anyway, Bug Buzz hits a lot of his team like the Obstagoon that Psychic can't hit. This set is semi-walled by Charizard, but Psychic still does a ton to it, so that's something to bear in mind. But yeah, this is a pretty interesting Orbeetle set. I want to see if I can make this work. Typically Orbeetle, not the best offensive Pokemon in the world, but I think it's kind of underrated, so we're going to give it a try this week. Next up, making his debut this season is going to be Warm Blood, the Rapidash. Very, very interesting set this week. Running Expert Belt with speed creeping to outspeed Charizard, and 40 HP to make sure that we can take a hit. Expert Belt 4 attacks might seem a little bit strange. No Swords Dance or Agility on this set or Flame Charge. I just need the out-and-out breaking power on this thing. Flash Fire is also pretty nice because it means I can actually take a fire hit from the Zard, or I can take a Fire Punch from things like the Conkeldurrs if he tries to bring it. Switch in a Rapidash, get myself a free boost, especially boosting Flare Blitz. Flare Blitz actually does a hell of a lot of damage to his team. Play Rough is there, of course, for the Conkeldurr and the Obstagoon and the Appleton. Drill Run is there for things like the Gengar, also on a Roosting Charizard, which is kind of a cool thing. Also hits things like the Bronzong and the Lantern. Bronzong, of course, if it's not Levitate. Wild Charge actually does quite a decent amount of damage. It does actually hit the Zard really, really hard. Do need to be careful with Golurk, of course, if it comes. But yeah, I think this thing has a lot of breaking power this week. This is a potential lead. Depends what he brings. But this could well be a pretty solid lead for us. And last but by no means least, we brought it so far quite a lot, and I really like this set. We brought it last week, kind of similar, but we're bringing it again this week. We are bringing the Rocky Helmet Gooey Goodra with the Acid Armor Body Press, much like we had last week. Earthquake we also had last week, but this time we got Outrage instead of Thunderbolt. Outrage actually does a hell of a lot of damage to a lot of this team outside of Togetic, so if he doesn't bring Togetic, Outrage is relatively spammable. Do need to be careful though. I do need to make sure I am set up before I click Outrage, and I do need to make sure that Togetic is gone, so yeah. Most of the time, Acid Armor Body Press is nice. Rocky Helmet Gumi is actually really annoying for things like the Conkeldurr to deal with, constantly being slowed down, as well as the Obstagoon. If I can actually slow Obstagoon down far enough, I can actually put in quite a ton of work here. Again, I realised I'm missing 4 EVs for some reason, so I just put that on Special Defense, but yeah. Pretty interesting set nonetheless. Different kind of strategy this week. The idea is trying to outlast his offense while actually dishing out a ton ourselves. If we can prevent that Gengar from setting up, we basically win the game ourselves. So hopefully, fingers crossed, that's what we do this week and we pull out another dub. Alright, So, I'm gonna get on out of here, so thank you so much for watching. My name is Royal Bomby Teacher. I'm your coach of the Royal Bomber for Bombies. Stay safe, stay awesome, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.